The desert wind carried more than dust that evening. It carried the sound of hooves of anger simmering just beyond the horizon. In the Arizona Territory, the year 1880 was already marked by tension. Settlers whispered of raids and lost cattle, of barns burned in the night, and of soldiers stretched thin across too many miles of hostile land. But for Emily Carter, none of those fears seemed real until they came to her father's ranch. Emily was 21, with auburn hair that never quite behaved in the desert wind and gray eyes that mirrored the storms over the mesa. She had grown up in Bitter Creek, a settlement of fewer than 50 souls scattered across the red soil, surviving through cattle grit and stubbornness. Her father, William Carter, had built their ranch board by board after her mother's death from fever when Emily was barely 10. He was a man of few words and iron rules: work hard, fear no one, trust carefully. That night, Emily stood on the porch with a lantern in her hand, staring out at the fading sun. The sky was painted in blood-orange streaks, beautiful and ominous. Behind her, inside the modest ranch house, her father was arguing with Deputy Marshal Clay Benton, who had come with a warning. "They're moving this way," Benton said grimly, hat in hand. "A war party. Half say it's Comanche stragglers, others claim Apache under a new chief. Doesn't much matter, they'll strike anything in their path." William Carter's jaw tightened. "This is my land. I won't run from shadows." Emily turned her lantern, trembling slightly. "Pa, if it's true, her father cut in, then we'll defend what's ours. I didn't build this place to abandon it at the first sign of smoke." Benton looked at Emily with weary eyes. "Miss Carter, you do well to convince him otherwise. The army's 2 days north, and if a war party hits here, no lawman alive can stop it." But William would not be swayed. By the time Benton rode off into the dusk, Emily knew they would be on their own. Hours later, the dogs began barking, sharp and furious. Emily rushed to the window. The barn glowed with sudden fire. Shouts filled the air, men screaming in a language she didn't know, rifles cracking, horses screaming in terror. She grabbed the shotgun above the hearth, but before she could load it, the front door burst open. Her father stumbled inside, blood darkening his shirt. Emily Seller now. Before she could move, shadows filled the doorway, 3 warriors' faces, painted eyes hard as flint. At their center stood a man taller than the rest, his chest bare, except for a bandolier of bullets, his dark hair braided with eagle feathers. His presence was commanding, dangerous. Her father lifted his rifle with shaking hands, but the warrior leader spoke first in accented but steady English. "Your land has taken my brother's blood," he said. "Tonight the balance is restored." Emily's breath caught. "No, please." She stepped between the warrior and her father without thinking. "If it's a life you want, then take mine. Spare him." Her father roared Emily no, but his strength was failing. The warrior studied her, his black eyes unreadable. "You would trade yourself for him?" "Yes." Her voice trembled but did not falter. The man's gaze lingered on her. Then he gave a single nod. "The daughter comes with us. The father lives." The other warriors shifted, some protesting in their tongue, but he silenced them with a curt command. Then he fixed Emily with a stare that seemed to pierce through to her very soul. "I am Kohana, war chief of my people. You are mine now." Emily's heart pounded in terror and disbelief. Yet in that moment she saw something strange flicker behind his harsh expression. Not cruelty, something more complex, though she could not name it. Before dawn, Emily was taken from the only home she had ever known. As the flames of her father's barn still licked the sky behind her, she rode eastward, bound to a fate she did not choose, her wrists tied with rawhide, her world collapsing into silence and shadows. But in the silence of the desert, under the cold watch of the stars, she realized she was not simply a prisoner of war. She was the unwilling bride of a man who carried a secret the world refused to believe. The desert night stretched endless, lit only by the pale glow of the moon and the flicker of embers from their torches. Emily rode tethered to one of the warriors, her wrists raw from the bindings. Each hoofbeat jarred her bones. Each gust of cold wind carried the smell of smoke from the burning barn they had left behind. She wanted to scream, to weep, but something inside her had gone cold and still, as if grief had no room to breathe in the presence of fear. Kohana rode at the front, silent as stone. His profile was sharp in the moonlight, high cheekbones, a strong jaw, and eyes that never seemed to blink. Unlike the others who muttered to one another in their own tongue, Kohana carried himself with a solitude that marked him apart. Even the warriors who had objected to sparing her father obeyed his slightest gesture. By dawn they reached a narrow canyon. The warriors dismounted, leading their horses into a hidden trail between the rocks. Emily stumbled when they dragged her down, her legs stiff from the night's ride. Kohana's hand shot out, steadying her before she fell. His grip was firm but not cruel. For a fleeting second, she felt the warmth of his palm through the rawhide. Then he released her and strode ahead without a word. The trail opened into a valley shrouded in morning mist. Hide tents wickiups rose in clusters around a central fire pit. Women moved between them, carrying baskets or tending to children, their eyes sharp with suspicion, as the warriors led Emily through the camp. Men straightened from their work, some scowling, some spitting in the dirt at the sight of her. Emily's cheeks burned with humiliation. Every gaze told her she was an intruder, an enemy, a symbol of blood debts not yet paid. She wanted to vanish, but Kohana walked with the unyielding stride of a leader presenting his prize. At the fire circle sat an elder wrapped in a blanket of dyed fibers, his hair white as bone, his face carved by years of wind and wisdom. His eyes narrowed at the sight of Emily. He spoke in Apache, his voice sharp as a whip. Kohana replied in measured tones, his words steady but firm. The elder argued, gesturing at Emily, then at the warriors who had followed him. Voices rose around the firemen and women alike, voicing anger. Emily stood rigid, unable to understand their words, but understanding perfectly their meaning. They didn't want her here. She was a spark in dry grass, a danger to their survival. Finally, Kohana raised his hand, silencing the noise. He switched to English, his voice carrying like a command that brooked no defiance. "This woman is under my protection. She is not prisoner. She is wife." The words struck Emily like a hammer. She stared at him, stunned, as gas rippled through the crowd. She opened her mouth to protest, but her voice broke in her throat. She had been traded like cattle, stripped not only of her home, but of her very name. The elder spat into the fire and turned away. Others murmured, disapproving but unwilling to challenge Kohana directly. The authority in his voice was undeniable. An older woman stepped forward. Her face was lined, but her eyes held a reluctant kindness. Kohana addressed her with a short command, then turned to Emily. "You will stay with Nita. She will teach you." Emily clenched her jaw. "Teach me to be your wife?" For the first time, something flickered in Kohana's eyes, almost like amusement. "Teach you to live. If you do not learn, you will not survive." She wanted to scream at him, to tell him she didn't want to survive here, that she wanted to go home. But she thought of her father, bloodied and helpless, spared only because of her choice. If she defied Kohana, now would his mercy stretch so far? So she followed Nita into a small wickiup near the edge of camp. Inside, the air smelled of smoke and sage. The woman gestured for her to sit and handed her a folded bundle of clothing, simple deerskin dress, soft moccasins. Emily clutched them in silence, her throat tight with rage and shame. Later, when darkness fell again, Nita led her back to the fire circle. The entire camp had gathered. The warriors sat in a half-moon, their weapons gleaming in the firelight. Women whispered, children stared. Kohana stood at the center, tall and unflinching. Emily's heart pounded as she realized what this was: a ceremony, a declaration. Not of love, but of possession. One scarred warrior stepped forward, his face twisted with hatred. He shouted at Kohana in Apache, his voice raw with fury. Emily caught only one word of Mitchell, her family name. The warrior spat at her feet, then turned away in disgust. Kohana did not flinch. He spoke his words, measured, his gaze sweeping over the crowd. Though Emily could not understand, she felt the weight of his authority. The murmurs quieted. Even those who opposed him dared not rise against him tonight. When the speeches ended, Kohana turned to her. His expression was unreadable, but his words were clear. "You will stay. You will learn. You are not captive. You are chosen." Emily's lips parted, her voice low but fierce. "I never chose this." For the first time, Kohana's expression shifted. There was no anger, no mockery, only something heavy, something almost like sorrow. He leaned closer, his voice so quiet only she could hear. "Neither did I." The fire cracked between them. And in that fragile silence, Emily realized that beneath his command, his power and his threat, this man carried a burden she did not yet understand, a burden that bound their fates together in ways more dangerous than any raider rifle. The morning after the fire circle felt colder than the desert had any right to be. Emily woke inside Nita's wickiup, her body aching from the hard ground, her mind raw from the memory of Kohana's words. "You are not captive, you are chosen." She hated them, hated him, And yet the way he had whispered neither did I haunted her more than she wanted to admit. Nita busied herself at the small fire boiling something sharp and bitter in a clay pot. She handed Emily a cup with a grunt. The liquid tasted like smoke and herbs, and Emily gagged, but Nita tapped her chest firmly. Strength, the woman said in broken English. You drink. Live. Emily forced it down, the warmth crawling through her belly. She realized then that Nita, despite her brusque manner, was not her enemy. The woman moved with the care of one who had raised many children, her patience seasoned by years of loss and endurance. Perhaps Kohana had chosen her as guardian not only for her skill, but for her heart. Still, when Emily stepped outside, the glares of the camp sliced at her like knives. Women paused in their task to whisper, men eyed her with hostility, and children too young to understand mimicked the scorn of their elders. She carried the water jug to the spring as Nita instructed, her cheeks hot with shame. Halfway there, another woman brushed past her, deliberately knocking the jug from her hands. It shattered on the stone's water, spilling into the dust. The woman spat a word Emily did not know, but understood all the same, outsider. Emily bent to gather the shards, biting her lips so hard she tasted blood. She wanted to scream, to shout that she hadn't chosen any of this, that she had been torn from her life just as they had lost theirs. But her voice stayed locked in her chest. That night she returned to Nita's tent with raw palms and blistered feet. She lay staring at the low roof until sleep claimed her. Dreams came fierce and strange, her father's voice, the crack of rifles, Kohana's unreadable eyes watching her from the firelight. The next day, Nita handed her a deer hide and gestured to the scraping tools. Emily blinked. She had sewn dresses and mended shirts back at the ranch, but this was different, harder, rougher. The hide was heavy, the smell pungent. She worked clumsily, her hands blistering anew. When Nita corrected her, she bristled. But when she managed a clean strip of hide, Nita gave a rare nod of approval. It was the first kindness she had felt since being dragged here. Days blurred into one another. Emily learned to grind corn with aching arms, to fetch water without spilling, to stitch moccasins clumsily under Nita's sharp eye. She was not accepted, but she was no longer ignored. Children began to watch her work with cautious curiosity. A little girl once touched her hair, whispering something Emily didn't understand. When she smiled tentatively, the girl giggled and ran. And always Kohana was there watching. He did not approach often, but she felt his presence like a shadow. When the warriors practiced with rifles at the edge of camp, he led them with precision and calm authority. When disputes broke out, his voice silenced the noise. At night, when he passed her tent, she caught glimpses of his face in the firelight, tired, guarded, burdened. One evening, as Emily carried wood back to Nita's tent, she saw Kohana speaking with a scarred warrior, Kitchi, the one who had spat at her feet. Their words were heated, sharp. Kitchi pointed toward Emily, his voice rising. Kohana's reply came like steel, firm, low-ending the argument with finality. Kitchi stalked away, eyes burning. Kohana's gaze found Emily's across the fire. For a moment, neither looked away. Later, Emily confronted him at the edge of camp. Her voice trembled but held. Why do you keep defending me? Your people don't want me here. Kohana studied her silently, then said, because you are under my word must stand. That's not an answer. He hesitated, then leaned closer. You are right. Some see you as enemy. Some see you as curse. But I... His voice faltered, and for the first time she saw uncertainty in him. I see something else. Emily's breath caught. What? Kohana's jaw tightened. Courage. Defiance. You stood before me with death in your eyes, not fear. My people need to see that courage, need to see that even in our enemies there can be strength worth respecting. Her anger flared. So I'm just a symbol to you, a tool. Kohana's expression softened, his voice low. No, you are more. But if I speak it now, you will not believe me. Before she could answer, shouts rang out from the hills. Warriors rushed to the camp's edge, weapons ready. Kohana barked orders, the camp erupting in swift practiced movement. Emily's heart thundered as she saw riders approaching a patrol of soldiers, their rifles glinting in the sunset. The air thickened with dread. Emily knew the soldiers had come for her. Yet as she watched Kohana step forward to meet the threat, tall and unflinching, she felt the ground shift beneath her heart. For the first time, she wondered not just if she would survive in this camp, but if she even wanted to leave it at all. The line of blue-coated soldiers drew closer, the evening light flashing off their rifles. Dust rose behind their horses, glowing red in the fading sun. Emily's heart pounded so hard she thought the warriors around her must hear it. This was her chance, her rescue. Yet as she stood among the Apache, her body bound neither by rope nor chain, she felt more a part of their circle than the riders storming down the valley. Kahana lifted one hand and the warriors stilled like drawn bows. His calm radiated across the camp, his authority absolute. He turned to Emily. "They come for you," he said simply. Her throat closed. "And if I go with them?" His jaw tightened. "Then there will be blood. They will not leave without claiming more than you." She looked at the children clinging to their mothers at Nita, standing with a knife in one hand, the other clutching a boy's shoulder. Emily thought of her father's ranch, of the safety she had once taken for granted. But she also thought of the barn burning, of Kahana stepping between her and his own men when they demanded her life. "I can stop this," she whispered, though she wasn't certain she could. Kahana's eyes searched her, sharp and unreadable. "If you step out there, you speak for us both. For our lives." Before she could respond, the soldiers reined in at the edge of the clearing. Their leader, a young lieutenant, barked in clipped English, "Release the girl, and lay down your weapons. This is your only warning." The warriors bristled, rifles and bows raised. One wrong twitch and the valley would explode with gunfire. Emily's breath caught. She pushed past Kahana before he could stop her, raising her hands high. The soldier's guns swung toward her instantly. "Wait," she shouted. Her voice cracked but carried across the clearing. "Don't shoot. I'm not a prisoner." The lieutenant blinked, lowering his glasses to confirm her face. "Miss Mitchell." "What in God's name?" "I came with them by choice," she interrupted. "No one forced me." Murmurs rippled through the warriors behind her. Kahana's gaze burned into her back. The lieutenant frowned. "Miss, your father has half the territory searching for you. If you'll step this way." "No," she said firmly. Her knees shook, but she held her ground. "Not unless you promise no one here will be harmed." The young officer laughed bitterly. "You don't understand, do you? These people raided a ranch. 3 settlers are dead." "They fight because they're hunted," Emily shot back. "But this band seeks peace. If you fire on them now, more will die on both sides. Do you want more widows? More graves?" The soldiers shifted uneasily. The lieutenant scowled, clearly torn. "You expect me to take the word of a captive?" "I'm not a captive," she said again, her voice cutting like steel. She glanced over her shoulder, meeting Kahana's eyes. For once the mask slipped and she saw gratitude there, raw, unguarded. After a tense pause, the lieutenant spat into the dirt. "Fine. 3 days. Tell your chief to meet Colonel Barrett at Fort Grant under a flag of truce. If he doesn't come, the army will treat this camp as hostile." Emily nodded, relief and dread tangling in her chest. "I'll tell him." The patrol wheeled their horses and rode off, dust trailing behind them like smoke. Only when the last hoofbeat faded did Emily's legs give out. She sank to her knees, trembling. Kahana was beside her, instantly lifting her to her feet. His grip was strong, steady. "You could have left with them," he said softly, voice threaded with both anger and awe. "I couldn't," she whispered. "Not like that. Not with so much blood waiting to be spilled." His gaze searched her face as though seeing her for the first time. "You risked your life for mine, for my people." Emily swallowed, unable to hold his eyes for long. "Maybe I risked it for myself too. I don't want to live in a world where hate decides everything." That night the camp buzzed with argument. Kitchi shouted that it was a trap, that Kahana's trust in the white soldiers would doom them all. Others muttered agreement, the firelight sharp on their angry faces. Nita stood silent, arms folded, watching Emily with something close to respect. Finally, Kahana rose, his voice carrying over the storm of dissent. "I have fought war for many seasons. I have killed their soldiers, and they have killed our brothers. This path leads only to ashes. But today, Mitchell's daughter could have walked free, and instead she chose to stand with us." All eyes turned to Emily, who flushed under the weight of their scrutiny. Kahana continued, "She believes in peace, and if our enemy's child can believe, why can't we?" The silence that followed was brittle, uneasy. Kitchi spat into the dirt and stalked away. Others muttered but said nothing more. Later at the edge of camp, Emily confronted Kahana. "You used me back there. Held me up like a banner." He didn't deny it. "Yes, because they must see through your eyes. You are the bridge no warrior can be." Her anger faltered at the intensity in his voice. "And what about you? What do you see?" Kahana stepped closer, his shadow mingling with hers in the firelight. "I see a woman who walked into my camp as my enemy, and stood today as my shield. I see strength I did not expect. And I see the only hope we have left." Emily's chest tightened. "That's a heavy burden to put on me." "It is a burden I share," he replied, softer now. "3 days from now, we walk into the lion's den together. And whatever happens, we face it side by side." For the first time since her capture, Emily believed him. The days leading to Fort Grant passed in taut silence, broken only by the steady rhythm of hooves and the cries of distant hawks wheeling against the pale desert sky. Emily rode beside Kohana, 3 trusted warriors trailing in wary formation. Each dawn brought colder winds sweeping down from the mountains, and with them a sharper edge of fear. She had not expected her heart to ache at leaving the camp. The children's laughter, the smell of bread, baking in the coals, Nita's stern instructions over the day's work, it had all become strangely familiar. Yet now the valley fell away behind them, and the open plains stretched ahead like a stage where their fragile hopes would be tested before a hostile audience. On the second night, they camped near a shallow arroyo. The warriors kept low fires, flames shielded by rocks, careful not to betray their presence to passing scouts. Emily sat wrapped in a borrowed blanket, watching sparks vanish into the dark. Kohana crouched beside her, his profile etched in shadow and ember glow. "You have not spoken much," he said. "I'm afraid," she admitted. "Not of your people anymore. Not even of the soldiers. I'm afraid of what will happen when both worlds collide." He studied her for a long moment. "They already collide. Every raid, every treaty broken, every grave dug on either side. What we do now is choose if there is anything left to build from the ruins." She looked at him, his scars, his weathered face, the quiet strength that seemed to anchor the very earth. "Do you believe it can work, peace, I mean?" Kohana's gaze lifted to the stars. "Belief is not enough, but if we do not try, then we are already dead." The next morning, Emily rose before dawn to find him sitting alone, sharpening a knife with slow, precise strokes. He looked up as she approached, and for once the guarded mask slipped. "When I was a boy, I was taken to the mission school. I learned your words, your books. They told me I could be both Apache and something else. But when I returned, my people no longer trusted me, and the soldiers still called me savage." Emily's throat tightened. "So you belong to neither world?" His lips curved in a shadow of a smile. "Until you walked into mine." She wanted to respond, but words failed. Instead, she touched his arm, the leather warm beneath her fingers. For the first time since her capture, he covered her hand with his. No warrior's command, no chief's burden, just a man seeking an anchor. By the third day, the adobe walls of Fort Grant rose from the horizon, stark and alien against the desert. Soldiers patrolled the ramparts, rifles gleaming in the harsh sun. Emily felt Kohana tense beside her. "I have only entered such places as a prisoner," he said quietly. "You come now as a leader," she reminded him, forcing her voice steady. "And you're not alone." At the agreed meeting point half a mile from the fort, they were met by Lieutenant Cooper and a small escort. His eyes widened at the sight of Emily, riding so naturally alongside Kohana, her posture neither chained nor submissive. "Miss Mitchell," he said stiffly, "your father is inside. He's been near mad with worry." Her stomach twisted. She had dreaded this moment more than any battle. "Take us to him." Inside the commander's office, Colonel Barrett sat behind a heavy desk face carved from stone. "James Mitchell?" Emily's father leapt to his feet the instant she entered. "Sarah," he caught himself correcting Emily. His hands gripped her shoulders, eyes searching her face as though to ensure she was real. "Thank God. Are you hurt? Did they—" "I'm fine," she interrupted gently. "Truly." James's eyes shifted to Kohana, narrowing with raw fury. "You!" His hand hovered near his pistol. "You took my daughter." Kohana did not flinch. His voice was calm, deliberate. "Your daughter offered her life to save yours. I spared you both." The room went taut. Colonel Barrett raised a hand. "This is a negotiation, not a battlefield. Let's keep it so." Emily drew a breath. "Father, I need you to listen. Kohana seeks peace. He doesn't want more blood." James barked a bitter laugh. "Peace with the man whose people burned our barn, killed neighbors." Emily's heart twisted. "And how many of his people have been killed by settlers and soldiers? This war has cost both sides. Father, please, we must see beyond vengeance." Colonel Barrett cleared his throat, breaking the standoff. "Chief Kohana, the government's position is clear. Your people must relocate to San Carlos. Rations and protection will be provided." Kohana's dark eyes flickered with restrained fury. "San Carlos is a graveyard. Bad water, no hunting, surrounded by enemies." You may as well ask us to dig our own graves. Barrett leaned forward. Those are the terms. Relocation or destruction. Emily stepped forward, fire in her chest. That policy has failed every time. It breeds only hatred. If you truly want peace, give them land small but their own. Let them live as they choose. Barrett arched a brow. And what authority do you claim to speak for them? Kohana answered before she could. She is my wife. The words dropped like stones into silence. Emily's father paled, his hand slamming the table. What did you say? It's true, Emily said, her voice trembling but steady. I chose him. Chose, James roared. They brainwashed you, forced you. This isn't marriage, it's blasphemy. Emily held his gaze, tears burning. No, it's the first choice that was truly mine. The silence that followed was heavier than any gunfire. Colonel Barrett's expression hardened, yet beneath it flickered calculation. Perhaps he thought there was a weapon in this unlikely bond. Negotiations dragged for hours. Barrett repeated demands, Kohana offered alternatives. Emily bridged the gaps with every ounce of conviction she had. By nightfall, no treaty was signed, but the unthinkable had happened. The guns had not fired. When at last they were dismissed, Emily and Kohana stood together in the courtyard under a rising moon. James Mitchell glared from the doorway, his figure rigid with betrayal. Kohana looked at her, voice low. You stood for me again. She shook her head. I stood for us. And though the walls of the fort loomed high around them for a heartbeat, she felt freer than she ever had before. The next morning dawned, gray clouds smudging the horizon like ash across the sky. Inside Fort Grant's timbered walls, the air was brittle with suspicion. Soldiers moved with stiff precision, their eyes lingering too long on the Apache delegation. Emily felt the weight of their stares as she walked beside Kohana across the yard, her father trailing close behind, like a shadow of rage. The council chamber smelled of ink and dust. Colonel Barrett sat at the head of the long table, papers stacked in neat piles before him. His face showed no fatigue despite the long debates of the previous day. To his left sat James Mitchell, his jaw-clenched eyes blazing whenever they fell on Kohana. Chief Kohana Barrett began, his voice clipped. Our position remains unchanged. The San Carlos Reservation is the only recognized solution. Your people will be provided for so long as they submit to government oversight. Kohana's tone was calm but unyielding. San Carlos kills more surely than bullets. Disease spreads there. Children waste away. We will not walk willingly into death. Barrett's expression hardened. The United States Army does not negotiate at the point of a knife. You will accept the terms or face the consequences. Emily leaned forward, unable to contain herself. Colonel, if I may. Barrett cut her off with a raised hand. Miss Mitchell, this is not a parlor for sentimental appeals. This is policy. Her father added harshly, you do well to remember which side you belong to, Emily. Her throat tightened, but she forced herself to meet his eyes. I know exactly which side I belong to, the side that wants fewer graves. The words struck like a slap. James surged to his feet, face mottled with anger. You shame your mother's memory. Do you even understand who this man is? They call him the Butcher of San Carlos. The words fell like stones in the room. Emily turned sharply toward Kohana, searching his face. For once, he did not hide behind his mask. He met her gaze, steady, unflinching. It is true, he said quietly. At San Carlos, soldiers drove my people like cattle. I led raids to free them. Men died. Women and children, too. They call it butchery. I call it war. Emily's chest hollowed. Why didn't you tell me? Because you already carry the burden of my people's hatred, he answered. I did not want you to carry my sins as well. Barrett seized the moment, his voice sharp. There is your proof, Miss Mitchell. The man you defend has blood on his hands. How many settlers never saw another dawn because of him? Kohana's voice cut across the room, deep and even. And how many Apaches were slaughtered under white flags? How many treaties burned while we still held the ink in our hands? The silence that followed was heavy, every breath weighted with ghosts. Emily's heart pounded, torn between the horror of the name spoken and the man she had come to know. The soldiers' whispers hissed at the edges of the chamber like snakes. At last she rose, her voice trembling but strong. I don't care what names you've given him. I've seen him protect children, spare my father's life when vengeance would have been easy, choose mercy over hatred. Judge him by what he does now, not by what war forced him to do then. Her father's face crumpled with grief as much as fury. You've lost yourself, Emily. No, she whispered. I found a truth you can't bear to see. Barrett leaned back, steepling his fingers. Enough. I'll make this simple. You return to your family, Miss Mitchell. Your father will take you home. Chief Kohana and his men will proceed to San Carlos. That is the only path forward. Emily's blood ran cold. She looked at Kohana at the set of his jaw, the storm in his eyes. He would rather die than lead his people into that prison. She knew it as surely as she knew her own name. No, she said flatly. Barrett's brows lifted. No, I will not leave him. If you send him to San Carlos, you'll have to send me with him. Gasps rippled around the room. James staggered back as though struck. Emily, you can't. I already did, she cut in. He is my husband, my choice, and I will not abandon him. Barrett's jaw tightened, but a flicker of unease crossed his face. The power of her declaration spoken within the walls of his own fort carried weight he had not anticipated. The negotiations disintegrated after that. Barrett dismissed them curtly, ordering that the Apache delegation remain confined within the fort until a decision could be reached. Guards were posted at their quarters, rifles gleaming. Emily stayed with them, ignoring her father's pleas to return to the officers' quarters. That night, in the dim lamplight of the crude barracks, she sat beside Kahana. His shoulders seemed heavier than ever, shadow carved across his face. You heard what they called me, he said at last. Yes, she whispered. And I heard what you said, too. War makes butchers of us all. He turned toward her, eyes raw in the flickering light. And yet you still chose me. Her hand found his. I didn't choose a legend or a ghost. I chose the man who stood between me and death, who believes peace is worth more than pride. I chose you. His breath shuddered, a sound she had never heard from him before. Slowly, almost hesitantly, he lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss against her scarred knuckles. Outside, the fort was silent, save for the creak of sentries' boots on wooden planks. Inside, Emily leaned against Kohana's shoulder, the storm of fear and doubt tempered by the fragile ember of certainty. Whatever the world called him, war chief, butcher, savage, he was hers. And she would fight every wall of this fort, every iron law to keep it so. The dawn at Fort Grant came cold and sharp, the mountains etched in pale silver against the sky. The bugle call rang out across the yard, summoning soldiers to their posts, and with it came the echo of decision. Emily stood by the narrow window of the barracks, watching the shadows lengthen as men prepared for whatever orders might come. Behind her, Kahana spoke quietly with his three warriors, their voices low, the Apache words a blend of resolve and fatalism. He broke away at last and came to stand beside her, his presence filling the small space. They will not give us land, he said. The colonel is set in his path. He will cage us or crush us. Emily's fingers curled around the window frame. Then we must give him another path, one he cannot deny. Kohana studied her face. You speak as if truth alone can change men who do not want to see it. Not truth alone, she said softly, but proof. Before he could answer, the door opened, and two guards entered, rifles slung, ordering them to follow. They were escorted back to the council chamber, where Colonel Barrett, James Mitchell, and several officers waited. The air was taut, the smell of coffee and gun oil heavy. Barrett wasted no words. Chief Kahana, the government's offer stands. San Carlos or war, decide now. Kahana's jaw tightened. Then you leave me no choice but to fight. Emily stepped forward before Barrett could answer. And if that fight begins here in your fort, how many of your men will lie in graves by sundown? How many widows in this valley will curse your name? Barrett's face darkened. Careful, Miss Mitchell. You forget yourself. No, Colonel, she shot back. I remember exactly who I am. I am James Mitchell's daughter and Kahana's wife. I stand between both worlds. If you force war, it will not just be Apache blood spilled. It will be your own soldiers, settlers, and innocents too. And history will remember you as the man who chose pride over peace. A murmur stirred among the junior officers. Even James Mitchell looked unsettled, though his fists remained clenched on the table. Barrett's lips thinned, but his silence betrayed hesitation. Kohana seized the moment. He stepped forward, his voice carrying the weight of command. Give us a valley, a small piece of earth. Let us keep our ways, hunt our food, raise our children. We will trade fairly, and we will aid you against those who still ride for war. Test us for 1 year. If we break our word, then send us to San Carlos. But if we keep it, then let it stand. The room held its breath. Barrett's eyes narrowed as he considered. And if raiders strike settlers in that time, then we will hunt them beside your soldiers, Kohana said. Not as prisoners, but as allies. The colonel's gaze swept to James Mitchell. And you, sir, will you vouch for this? James stiffened. His eyes burned on his daughter, then shifted reluctantly to the Apache chief who now stood so close beside her. At last he said hoarsely, if my daughter believes in this, then I'll stand for it too. I'd rather try peace than bury her. Barrett exhaled slowly, the decision heavy on his shoulders. Finally, he nodded once. Very well. 1 year. A trial. But understand me clearly, one raid, one betrayal, and I will wipe your band from the map. Kohana inclined his head. Your warning is heard, and my word is given. Relief swept through Emily so fiercely her knees nearly buckled. For the first time in weeks, hope did not feel like a distant mirage, but something solid almost within reach. That evening, as the Apache delegation prepared to depart, James approached his daughter outside the gates. The desert wind whipped dust around them, the sky painted with streaks of fire by the sinking sun. Emily, he said, his voice rough, I don't understand your choice. Maybe I never will. But you found something worth standing for, and I see that now. If you believe this man can give you peace, then I'll try to believe it too. Her throat tightened as she embraced him, the smell of leather and smoke familiar and bittersweet. Thank you, Father. That's all I ask for you to try. Kohana watched from a short distance, his face unreadable, until James turned to him. Protect her. Not just from your enemies, but from your pride. She deserves better than the life this land has given most women. Kohana's voice was quiet but steady. She deserves everything. I will give all I have to keep her safe. For the first time, James Mitchell extended his hand. It was not trust, not yet, but it was a beginning. Kohana clasped it with a warrior's grip. The ride back to the hidden valley felt different. The land itself seemed to breathe easier. The weight of imminent bloodshed lifted, if only for a time. Emily rode beside Kohana, their hands brushing often, the unspoken promise between them, stronger than any treaty. That night, beneath the vast dome of stars, the Apache lit fires of celebration. Drums echoed off the canyon walls, and for the first time, laughter mingled with the crackle of flame instead of war cries. Emily stood beside Kohana, his hand warm around hers as the people sang of hope. Later, away from the firelight, they walked together to the ridge overlooking the valley that might soon become their sanctuary. The moon bathed the land in silver, the breeze carrying the scent of sage. Do you believe it will hold, Emily asked, her voice hushed. Kohana looked out at the horizon, his profile carved in pale light. Peace is fragile like glass. One stone can shatter it, but tonight we have a chance. That is more than my people have had in a lifetime. She turned toward him, her heart swelling with both fear and fierce devotion. Whatever comes, we face it together. He pulled her close, his forehead resting against hers. Together, he murmured. In that moment, beneath the endless sky, they were no longer captive and captor nor settler in Apache. They were simply two souls daring to build a bridge across a chasm of blood in history. The year ahead would test them. Prejudice, betrayal, and hardship would press against their fragile peace. But for now, in the hush of the desert night, Emily believed. And that belief, fierce and unyielding, was enough to carry her into whatever dawn awaited.